In this video, I will cover the evolution of all the model from the Tau army, from their first codex up to the last modification they did to the model. And what I mean by modification, I'm not talking about the data sheets, I'm really talking about the model themselves. So we will start with the first Tau codex that was released in 2001. If you ever want to get one of those books, they're really cheap online. You can find them easily. And it's really interesting because once you start reading them one after another one, you can see the evolution of that young race of Tau going for the greater good and really hoping to join as many species as they can to their empire. And you realize over time the writing kind of changed, and they seems to put them more as a more aggressive conqueror and not as such as the good benevolent young species with a lot of technology trying to bring as many people under their umbrella or their shelters. So we'll start with the first model. The first one was one of the HQ, that was the commander. It is basically an XV8 crisis battle suit. And there wasn't much difference between the first battle suit, the normal XV8 crisis. The only thing, usually the commander will have an antenna located on the top of their head. And I don't have a crisis. That's, all right, that's a bad start. But anyways. So the commander is just a basic XV8 crisis battle suit. The big thing was actually just in the data sheet. All the weapons were the same, that you use a battlesuit bodyguard like this one right there, or you stay with the commander, or even if you go with the basic XV8 crisis battlesuit, they all carry the same weapon. So you may find a commander dressed exactly like a normal XV8, but only you will see that antenna in the middle just to differentiate it from the others. It offers to bring along two bodyguard, and usually those bodyguard, the only distinction they add from the other, since they are Chavray, the antennas and the helmet of the head of the model is going to be a bit different. But beside that, they were the exact same. So the XV8 Crisis Commander, the XV8 Crisis Bodyguard, or even the traditional Crisis Battlesuit, will have exactly the same model and the same weapon on them. The second one, of course, is the Ethereal cast member. And do I have one around? I don't think. I think the only one I got right now is this one, but this one is not representative of what it was at that time. There were a more older version in metal, and they usually carry a stick with them. Then you got their first stealth team. That is the XV15 Stealth. Like those, they were completely in metal. And as you can see, they were really good looking, and it's one of my favorite model from the Tau army. They had different positioning, like this one, from a sideways to holding the gun in the front, like such. And it was kind of interesting to have those on the battlefield. After that, of course, we got the Fire Warriors. At that time, they were carrying the pulse rifle, and they were pretty much similar as this plastic one. It's kind of sad I still didn't find any old metal ones, but for now, that is what it looks like. We had the origin of the devilfish, the transport devilfish that usually carry either the Fire Warriors or the Pathfinders. And usually they were colored under this old scheme in that beige. It was a really beautiful model. Usually you got somebody sitting on the top. That was one of the first one. Honestly, it's one of my favorite of the vehicle that they had at that time. Not as powerful, but really interesting. In the first edition, of course, they brought the crude carnivore. If you read the codex, they will really explain how the crudes are actually evolving from what they eat. So that's why they have a tendency to be carnivores and eat their prey. But the shaper, that is the leader of the crude, will decide what they should and should not eat to prevent some unwanted genetic modification into their body. The first drones that we could see at the early beginning of the Tau was actually the gun drones. Thus is the drone. Do I have one around? I don't have one around. I'm really bad right now. Not starting well, but anyways. So the gun drone were actually really interesting. They could move from a team of 4 up to 8. And after that, we had the Pathfinders. And something interesting, I think, do I have a Pathfinder build? I don't have one build, but that is one of the original one. One of the original Pathfinders that you could see at that time, at this time. But in those years, in 2001, the way it works, you would buy blisters, and they would come in a kit, and you had like 3 Pathfinders in it, in different position. And you had to be careful, because when you were buying a box, you really have to look at it to make sure you're not buying 2 times the same box, because there is at least 6 or 7 variation in their positioning, and you do not want to repeat that if you wanted a really diverse team on the field. So if you're ever interested to buy really older models and you're looking at blisters, sometimes the sponge that you see in the back will go in the front and you don't really see the model. So just be careful, right? You don't want 5 boxes of the same exact model. Another one that showed up in the first edition was actually the crude hounds. That was those kind of dogs. And again, they kind of find out that the hound themselves are crude that ate too much of a specific meat, and they got that evolution. So they're basically sharing the same DNA to an extent with the normal crude. And I think we'll find the Crutox, so I'll skip those 2 for now. So we got the Crutox that was actually a big beast with a crude sitting on his back with a big cannon. And they found out the same thing. The Crutox, that is the big beast under the crude, is actually crudes that ate too much of a specific species. They evolved beyond a certain, how can I say that, genetic evolution where they cannot come back from it. So this is what happened when a shaper from the crude doesn't take care of his clan. They will turn out as such, or a different variation of such. I don't have any crude, not yet. I'm still looking for the first generation of crude, but we will get there. Now for the XV-88 broadside. The XV-88 broadside was actually an XV-8 Crisis, but with different weapons, like this one. And the way they usually do it, as you can see, it's half plastic and half metal. So the weapon were metal with the arms, and the back of the vents and the feet were actually made of metal. Oop, sorry, I was a bit. So yeah, you got the weapon, the arms, and the vents, and the feet at the bottom that were completely metal. All the rest was plastic. So that was a nice combination, and you got the weight out of it. It's really kind of fun to have in your hand. And honestly, I would understand somebody preferring playing with a heavy one. You will see later on the broadside really change over the years. Instead of having the rail guns over them, you're supposed to have 2 of them, of course, like this. So instead of having double railgun on both sides of the shoulders, they will be combined later and be holding in their hands to fight on the battlefield. So that is a great modification, but the original broadside was exactly the same suit from a crisis. So you could easily take a crisis and turn him into a broadside and the other way around. Now we got the hammerhead, and for the hammerhead, it is not one of the original, but we got one of the hammerhead right here. The big difference with the hammerhead of that time and now, the Skyray wasn't created in the first edition. So you will not find a Skyray in the first codex. The only thing you will find is actually, do they show it? Yeah, was the fusion rifle. So you had the choice between the fusion or the, we'll go back on the top, or the railgun that is located on top of the hammerhead. So that was the limit of that time for the hammerheads. Here is an example of the Eterol that I was talking about with the sticks. So that is actually what they look like in the first generation. We'll just flip them quickly. They will just show the different pattern, different build for the hunter cadre for the fighting. If you wonder for the colors for the Tau are a practical army. So even if the first codex, they said it, they usually use colors to blend in or camouflage themselves. They will rarely use the color of their sept to represent the full body, and usually it's going to be either the antenna or the helmet of some suits. Beside that, that's it, only on markings. They suggested in that time that the stealth, the XV-15, will be a bit of a darker color since they were supposed to be stealthy and harder to see, of course. I'll just keep going. So it's just different painting strategies, how to make some different shadows, different color scheme. It's not related to the sept, but it's really more to blend in with the environment. We had different colors for the crude, and the way they explain why the crude, because it's a specific species, and the way they explain why the different colors is basically from what they eat. So they change color depending on what they feed themselves. So of course you can actually get yellow crudes or blue crudes or green one. So there is no specific colors as such. So that's a really interesting fact. Here we got a crude shaper that I was talking about. This is the guy that decides what the crude should eat when they have a kill. Here we got the Hanshi and the Commander Farsight. At that time that was Hoshova, but we will see them later on. But that's the only place we can actually see the models themselves. For the Hanshi, I actually got one standing right here that I was able to salvage, but it's missing an arm, as you can see. So it was still a metal, made out of metal completely, but now I have to find an arm to try to replace and repair it. And this pretty much conclude the first models from the first codex. As you can see now, we got the data sheet for the Commander Farsight and for Hanshi. And this concludes the first codex and the first models from that first generation of Tau in 2001. In 2005, they released the second codex, and now it's named under Tau Empire, compared to before that was just the Tau. And in this one, we got a few newer models. And it pretty much repeats the exact same thing the same data, the same information that we get from the 2001 Codex. They go a bit more in detail for the phase, the expansion phase from the colonies of the Tau. We got the first, second one, and now we got the third one that was a newer one that came and added up 2 new set. But this is not that much important for now. We will move. So there we go. So again, we still got exactly the same HQ. We got the same commander, the same bodyguard. As you can see, I was talking about the antenna over the top of the leader. Here we got an example, and the bodyguard will get the antenna reverted, like such. That is pretty much the only thing that was identified them as being different. The Ethereal started showing up with actually holding a stick instead of having that I'm not sure if it's a baton, something like that. We still got the Crisis battle suit, again, same model as the broadside. And for this one, it's really interesting because in the second generation, we got the XV25 that showed up. And when you read it, it says you can use the XV15 or the XV25. So in this, we got this new combination, let me tag this, of either using the XV25 stealth or the older XV15. So they were letting you use either under the same data sheet. So that was pretty interesting at that time. So it was a nice move from them to let people actually still enjoy their models that they just got not too long ago. Here we got the XV22 battlesuit that was owned by Shadow Sun. And the XV22, I got a medal. The XV22, when you bought it from the blisters, came with either the helmet or the naked head of Shadow Sun over the top. I'm supposed to have a backpack in the back. I got the arms and the backpack, but they're not glued on right now because I'm still cleaning it. We still got the Fire Warriors. Again, same model. We got Devilfish again, Troop Carrier. The exact same model. Crew were the same. We still had the gun drones, the Pathfinders. And now there's a new addition. We got the Piranha. The Piranha was a quick flyer that was able to go across the field fast. And here is a newer model, but that's what was released for the first time in 2005. So that was really interesting because now you don't just have the Devilfish to move your troop fast. You actually had the Piranha that could actually move really fast across the board. And that was a really nice addition to the 2005 Codex. A new species joined the Tau Empire, and that was the Vespids. And the Vespids were actually flying unit in that time that could join up. They were more like Pathfinders, and usually they were suggesting using the crew with the Fire Warriors, and with the Pathfinders, use the Vespid. The broadside were the same, exactly the same model. And another new one, I actually ordered it. I actually still don't have it. But you had the sniper drone team. So you had the spotter that was actually a Fire Warrior sitting behind a device to spot. And you had up to three sniper drones to shoot and tag along with him. The Hammerhead does come back. And this is the first time we got the Stingray showing up for the first time on the battlefield. So from then, we got the model that I showed you earlier, that box, that give you the option between the Hammerhead with the railgun, or using the missile system. Now we got the origin of the Anva. Anva is a model of an Iteral sitting on a flying chair with two bodyguards that are standing on each side, and they're supposed to be each one of them Iteral themselves as bodyguards. I'll try to find maybe in the image later on one of his picture. Farsight does a comeback, of course. He's going to be there from the first codex up to the end, and this is the first introduction, of course, of the Shadow Sun that I showed you right here. Here we got the exact same model, but this one is in plastic without the helmet, and this is an example of one of the different shape that this Shadow Sun model could take. And this is pretty much it for the second edition, so we'll just do a quick review. As you can see, we can see the Shadow Sun with the helmet, the Shadow Sun without the helmet. She had her own drones and two shield drone. The Anva that I was talking about with his two bodyguards is sitting on a chair with two bodyguards. Those came at that time. You had the option of those newer version of the Iteral that was really interesting, as you can see here. Then we got simple again crisis. This is the commander, and of course his bodyguard. We got a broadside, normal crisis, the stealth suit under the same scheme as the XV-15, that means darker colors. And I think this cover up pretty much everything. Like I said, the drone snipers with the spotter right there. And that's it for the second codex. Oh, maybe I'll show you the Vespid quickly. So usually Vespid here we can see 6 of them. If I remember carefully, you could only get 5 of them in a kit. And that's it. So then the third codex was released in 2012. So nearly 7 years later, they did an update for the Tau. And here is really the biggest modification they ever did to the Tau. So we will start, I think, yep, we can start right here. So again, we got the commander that is still there, but the commander kind of changed shape. And now the commander was coming under this new model. It wasn't built on the Crisis anymore. It was completely different. The armor seems to be the same, but the model is completely different. Its shape is really well done. The thrusters in the back are different. It was a really wonderful first model for the commander, and really you could easily spot it on the field. The Iteral, of course, the same Iteral were showed once again, so nothing changed from there. This is the first introduction for the Couch Fire Blade, and this is one of them. This one I just salvaged it not too long ago, and I didn't have time to clean it up and actually paint it, and this is how I got it. So that was a nice HQ for either your Fire Warriors. Not sure if I would bring it with Pathfinders, but anyway, that was an interesting HQ to bring along. The Fire Warriors are still there. Like I said earlier, this model that is more traditional and everybody knows from either the video games or on the tabletop. You will see the Breachers will show up really later on. The Pathfinders are still there. Devilfish is still there. And oh, that was something I forgot. That was the first introduction from the grav inhibitor, pulse accelerator, and the recon drones. So like this one is a grav inhibitor that was different from the gun drones. And it's really interesting. That started to make the model from the drone different and really more beautiful on the field itself. For the gun drone, I forgot to show you, but we actually got gun drone on this devilfish right there. You can see them. And they were just carrying 2 pulse rifle at the bottom to be able to shoot. Like I said, the devilfish is still tagging along. The Codexes kept pretty much the same model, a bit different now. They don't have any metal anymore. They were completely made out of plastic. So that made a huge difference in the models, and they were a lot lighter. Then we got the first broadside carrying that double railgun that I was talking about. And I think I got one right here. So you can see the difference with it. And he was carrying 2 drones with missiles. So we went from a crisis battle suit with 2 railguns attached on top and the missiles on his hands to a battle suit that doesn't carry the missiles anymore, but actually have them on drones, and he will carry those double railgun or heavy rifles, sorry. You could of course replace them with missiles too, but you would sacrifice it compared to the earlier model where just the Crisis was actually carrying the whole kit. The stealth team, from here we still got the XV-15 and 25 name into the book, so they were still letting you, in that time, in 2012, using both of them, the older generation and the newer one. Here we got the first time we see a Riptide show up in the Codex, and I think I got one right here. So the Riptide was a lot larger when you look at it. It was extremely big for the first time seeing one on the battlefield compared to those original broadside. That seems not even comparable, right? And now with even the commander sitting beside it, you can see the difference on the battlefield, and that could attract a lot of attention on the battlefield. So people will focus a lot of their energy on this or the broadside because the broadside was bigger at that point in time. I'll just put it to the side. Don't want to drop it. The sniper drone are still named, and usually there is nothing that's been removed except the XV-15 later on, but pretty much all the other models are just kept on and carried on. Piranha's still there, those 2-sitter, and now we got the Sunshark bomber and the Razor Shark. So I got an example here on his, I'll try to remove this, give me a second. So this was actually a Razor Shark, and the Razor Shark came with the front gun, and we had this turret that could be turned from the bottom right there. And that was one of the first flyer beside the Vespids, but the first flyer as actually a vehicle that you can bring along with the Tau army. So that was really interesting to get this flyer for once on the battlefield. The Emerald is still there, Skyray is still there. The Crude Carnivore are back. That means the Crutox, the Crude, and the Crude Hound. The Vespids are still there. I just want to make sure that I'm not... Yeah. The drones are back, but then we're starting to see the shield drone marker drone starting to show up on the battlefield. So the marker drone were basically marker lights, and the shield drone were actually there to absorb a lot of damage. Commander Farsight is still there. Commander Shadow Sun is still there. And at that time, that is when the plastic Shadow Sun showed up. So in 2012, they removed the metal ones for this one. And this one was the previous metal one they were offering before. The Envoy is still there with his bodyguards. And this is where Longstrike appear. Longstrike is actually a commander that you will put over an emerald, and you will give bonus to your emeralds. And usually it came in a small package like this, and it was really simple, really small sprue with the body all done. The only thing, one arm and the head was detached, and you just had to put it sitting on top of your emerald. And sometimes it will help to either make better ballistics skills for your emerald. This Dark Strider, I don't have one yet, was another of the HQ you could bring along. And like I said, you can bring it with either the Fire Warriors or your Pathfinders. Hunchy is still there. That was the metal Eterol that I showed you earlier, missing an arm, but I don't have an earlier model yet. And this pretty much conclude all the Tau for this third codex. But the thing is this, in this one, this was the first time, and this image will come often in many other codex afterward. And this was the size comparison between the different models. So as you can see, the Crisis battlesuit and the Enforcer battlesuit, that is the Commander, got a big difference. They look alike, but they're not the same. And as you can see, the Commander is a lot higher. Then you got a Broadside that was really, under his name, was really more broad than the original Crisis that it was based on. And of course, the Reptile that shows up over all the others. And this pretty much concludes this codex. Just to show you, like I said, for the Broadside, you could remove the heavy rail rifle and put the missiles instead, or the high yield missiles. Beside that, it's pretty much what it is. Oh, and I completely forgot about that. That was the first time that the Pathfinders actually had scout drone. And now we'll wait, I must have one around here somewhere. So, of course. So, yeah, I think I said about the recon drone, but the recon drone is that long drone that is right now leading in kill teams for the Tau, that is extremely powerful. But that was his origin. So in 2012, that was the first time that he brought it on the field, and that was starting to make the Pathfinders a lot less weaker and a bit more versatile on the field. So that was something really interesting that he brought in this version. Within a year, so in 2013, they made this one in 2012, and they made this expansion for the Farsight in 2013. And this one doesn't bring anything new on the field. The only thing that explains a bit more what the Farsight is, what his story is. Now he separated himself from the Tau army. And I will show you the only thing that he brought to the game with them, if I can find them, the 8. So the 8 were actually Commander Farsight with the second commander, third commander. You could bring along an XV8 Crisis, another Crisis. Here we got the commander with the enforcer battle suit. There's not much difference between a commander, traditional commander, and an enforcer, beside the type of armor that he was using for the body itself. And beside that, it was pretty much the same. The 8 came with a broadside with all the salvo of high yield, the missile pod, and of course a riptide. So that's pretty much the only thing that this book brought. It's just those specific division for the Farsight and explaining the colors, the color scheme, if you wanted to play with the Farsight. That's the only time that I saw one of the codex present a specific set, if we can consider the Farsight as a set, under a specific scheme of color, and that is that dark red. Beside that, they are always in red, and all the other Tau will, of course, use a color scheme that represent either the battlefield they're in or what they need to be identified on the field. So that's pretty much it for that little extension of Codex that they did in 2013. Now, in 2015, this is pretty much the last time there was a big modification. We're in 2021, so in the last 6 years, there wasn't any new models since then. So really this one really decide the last evolution of the Tau models that are offered. And we'll see if I can find it quickly. There we go. So there's a few models that was added that are really interesting. So of course we got the commander, pretty much the same that I showed you earlier. That was this one. So it's a really basic commander. That was the first time the iteral on the flying drone showed up, and that was the iteral I showed you earlier. And this is when we saw him showing up for the first time on the battlefield. The Commander Farsight was still there. Commander Shadowsun 2. Anshi was still there. Hanva was still there. Not much of a difference. Cloud Fireblade was still there. Dark Strider was still there. And in the strike team, that is really interesting, because now the Fire Warriors were divided in really 2 separate categories. And that is the strike teams, like this, or the breacher team, like this one. And it's really interesting because the strike team came with the missile turret that you could tag along with them. The only thing, of course, when you move with them, the turret is going to disappear and be destroyed if you summon it in the battle. So basically, once you're settled in a spot, you could summon that turret to drop on the field and then start to attack. But as soon as you moved a certain distance from the turret will be gone. The Kroot are back, of course, with all the same. We got a Kroot, the Shaper, the Kroot Hound, and the Krootox. At that time, they called it the Krootox Rider. That was the big Kroot, the big Krootox with the Kroot on top with the big cannon. The Stealth are there, and this is the first time they stopped using the XV-15 within the description itself. So in this generation, that was in 2015, that was the 4th Codex, they completely removed the old XV-15, and at this time they become useless on the battlefield. We still got the Crisis Battlesuit, the Crisis Bodyguard, again pretty much the same. And this is the first appearance of the Ghost Kill. And the Ghost Kill was really interesting because it was basically a huge version of the XV25, and that was a really solid battle suit to have on the field if you wanted to breach some lines. And it was pretty scary in that time. So it was really interesting to see this appear out of nowhere with his own specific drone. And the stealth drone were really, really useful in that time. So that was really interesting to see this. And pretty much that's where the Tau started to peak within their own faction. The Reptile is still there, of course. We got the gun drones, the Piranhas. We had the Pathfinders with that scout drone. The Devilfish is still there. The Razor Shark and the Sun Shark Bomber. The Vespid, the sniper drone with the Farsight marksman. And it's pretty interesting because instead of being a spotter, now it's called the Farsight marksman. So they just changed the name, but it's pretty much the same model. The Hammerhead is still there, exactly the same. In this picture we see the Longstride sitting over the top of his Hammerhead. The Skyray is still there, broadside exactly the same. And this is pretty much the last addition that they made for the Tau, and that was the Storm Surge. So we had the Commander starting to get bigger. Then we had the Riptide that showed up, and he was getting bigger too on this model. And then the Storm Surge that was nearly a Titan for the Tau in that time. And this enormous model was really there to do a lot of damage and massive damage. So it was really, really interesting to have it, but it was kind of weak. It had only 8 wounds at that time, and it was crazy to have it, but usually it was the first target to go down in your army. The enemy will either hide from his cannon, and if you didn't have a Skyray to hit them from behind cover, they will either evade him or try to rush it to destroy him as fast as possible. But that was a unique and extremely big model in that time. So that was really interesting to see this appear. And that's pretty much it. The only modification that we got since then is the newer version of the Shadow Sun, but it's similar to this one. The only thing is the base itself is a bit bigger. That's it. She's standing up on a bigger piece of metal or building, and that was pretty much it. Beside that, nothing else changed from the newer version, and nothing was brought since then. So since 2015 there was no big update for the Tau, and that was kind of sad. And what happened, we had the Titans showing up here and there, and this is really, I did a video about it, but in around 2008 or 10, we had the only thing that could resemble a Titan for the Tau, and that was the SXV 141. That was a creation from Chapter House, and this one is not even the right size. It's 40% smaller than the actual XV 141 that was actually this wide, and I will say like that high more. That was the only thing that we had before the Storm Surge, if you were really interested to get something that was able to dash a lot of damage on the field and at the same time have enough wound to take it. But since it's not a real Games Workshop model, a lot of people didn't accept them on the field. But if you wanted to join a real big battle and your opponent had big titans on his side, you were kind of screwed. And the Storm Surge, even if it ponders a lot of damage against another titan, he wasn't standing his ground at all. So either you had to bring a lot of shield drones, or a lot of people will just bring like 3 Riptide with a lot of drones, and they'll just output a lot of damage. So this pretty much covered everything that I wanted to explain to you, and this was the complete evolution of all the models quickly with the books of the Tau army. So I hope this will guide you guys. For collectors, at least it gives you an idea where everything evolves, and from there we'll see what happened and if Games Workshop will actually do a decent upgrade in the next codex. And the way I see it, we will not see anything maybe for another year or 2, and that is the minimum. If we're not lucky, we can wait another 5 years before something happens. So on this, thank you for watching. I hope this helped you out, and I just wanted to share my love for the Tau. All right, bye.